On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Hey everybody, we're the Mentorers. I'm Jamie. I'm here with my co-host Gabe. Gabe, how you doing, buddy?
You know, I'm doing good. I've just returned from the Windy Apple. That's Chicago.
Is that what it's called? Yeah,
that's what it's called. Yeah, the Windy Apple. I performed in the performed in the Chicago Triathlon this past weekend.
Congratulations!
Thank you. You know,
successful triathlete.
Do you know how to know if someone does triathlon?
They tell you about it?
Exactly.
They have a podcast just to tell random strangers about their triathlon accomplishments.
I felt good. We had a lovely Shabbat dinner at my friend who I was staying with, a successful neurologist.
Nice.
Had a wonderful Shabbat dinner with some doctors, and then a couple of great races. And let me tell you, it was a blast. So highly recommend anyone interested in doing the Chicago Triathlon. It was a great time.
That's great. We've got an exciting show today. While you were busy swimming in Lake Michigan, I was lucky enough to sit down with Keith Law. Keith Law is a well-known, I think, to many of our listeners, baseball writer. He writes for The Athletic and the New York Times, previously from ESPN, previously of the Toronto Blue Jays front office as well.
It's not the best reason you had Keith on.
Yeah, I was going to say. So
maybe we should explain why Keith was here.
Yeah, so he wrote an article about a recent Yankees draft pick named Cord Jackson. Core is from Sarnia.
So that's not Cord. It is Core.
Core. C-O-R-E. Yeah. And he had an anti-Semitic incident in his youth when he was a 17-year-old freshman. It sounds like at the University of Nebraska, he drew a swastika on the door of a Jewish student's dorm room. His excuse at the time was that he was blackout drunk and didn't recall the incident.
We're supposed to understand that is a rare event at the University of Nebraska.
Well, I think there's so few Jews in that particular pocket of the prairies that I've heard, there's probably swastikas drawn. They're not always drawn on Jewish students' doors.
Do you know what the N on the football helmet of the University of Nebraska players stands for?
Not Nebraska?
No, it stands for knowledge.
Ah, wow. That's very funny. Anyways, as the article goes into detail, Jackson, this event was known. Jackson's representation, reached out to teams to advise them of it. He also had a DUI charge in 2024.
So he was ahead of it. He was ahead of the story.
Yeah, he was ahead of it. And that's sort of part of the story as well, just sort of like how this gets out, how the sort of, media gets interested in these sorts of stories. And, part of the story details his attempt at growth, including with advice from Yeshiva Maccabees basketball coach and father of MLB prospect Jacob Steinmetz, Elliot Steinmetz, who has sort of been, I guess, a bit of a, I don't want to say rabbi, that's too on the nose, but a bit of an advisor to this young Cord Jackson, who was drafted by the Yankees. So it's it's sort of like I think we always say this about MLB prospect stories or draft pick stories, that it's sort of like let's see how this goes. It's very possible we never hear his name again because of normal baseball things for, a 22-year-old draft pick. It's possible this is a guy who comes up on the prospect list and becomes a, notable minor league or even a major league player for the Yankees or someone else. So it'll be interesting to monitor that.
So Jamie, what you're telling me is that there's this kid. He came from rural Ontario, a Canadian kid. He did a objectively anti-Semitic thing when he was a young kid. But instead of hiding from it, instead of running from it, he has connected his representation, his organization. They've connected with a local Jewish leader in New York, who we are, close personal fans of, Elliot Steinmetz of the Yeshiva University basketball team, to sort of learn and grow from this. I would say that's like better than most. Like, I think this is probably a good news story at the end of it.
Yeah, I think it's like no one's looking at this being like, well, we're glad that kids are doing anti-Semitic things, or I don't want to let them off the hook by calling them kid. It's bad when athletes do anti-Semitic things. It's bad when anyone does anything anti-Semitic. This is a interesting way of approaching it, and I think hopefully a productive one, and one that leads to some growth and more discussion. This is a very commented on story from what I could see from The Athletic. I think people had a lot of feelings about this, and it was interesting talking to Keith about whether one mistake for a 17-year-old should how much that should affect their future. So why don't we throw now to our interview with Keith Law.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
Very excited to be joined today by Keith Law. Keith is the senior baseball writer for The Athletic magazine, part of the New York Times now. Keith has worked in the Toronto Blue Jays front office, our favorite team. And he's here today because of an article that he wrote, just came out with he co-wrote with Brandon Cootie, about a Yankees draft pick. So Keith, tell us a little bit about why was this Yankees draft pick notable, or what was notable about him, let's say?
Yeah, because before the draft, he wasn't notable. I had nothing on this player his name is Court Jackson. He was the University of Utah. He was a senior. He had a fine year, but honestly, a senior playing at Utah, it's a bit of an offensive environment because there's a little bit of altitude. I looked at the performance. I was like, whatever. This is not super exciting. Maybe it was a money saver. And I was talking to a scout, not with the Yankees, but who covers Utah as part of his territory. And he said, good luck doing the background on that one.
Interesting.
Background? What's going on? And he just gave me the very bare bones of it. And I immediately went to my editors with this. And he said there was basically an anti-Semitic incident while Jackson was playing at the University of Nebraska, where he played for 1 year as a freshman. So he went there as a freshman, then went to junior college, went to Utah as a junior. And I'll put a pin in that for a second, because that's where the story starts to get interesting. But just to give people a little bit of the background on the story, I went to my editor and said, I think there's something for us to do here. Wondering to what extent the Yankees even knew about the anti-Semitic incident. Sure. And so I started sort of working through the process, immediately reached out to Brendan because he's our Yankees beat writer. So this does not have to be my story. Maybe it's better being the Yankees, coming from our Yankees writer, because he has different contacts within the organization than I would.
Sure.
So the way the story goes then, I reached out, eventually got to Court Jackson's agent, who said, yep, everything you've heard is true, walked me through the whole story. And that then we sort of started reporting it out. It became a very different story than what I originally thought was, hey, this is a pretty big issue. Should he even have been drafted? Sure. So what happened was, when Court Jackson was a freshman at the University of Nebraska, he drew something along those lines, a swastika outside the dorm room of a Jewish student at Nebraska. Jackson has said, and I do not condone this or think it's any sort of excuse, but he said he was blackout drunk at the time, didn't remember doing it.
Sure.
When he was a junior at Utah, he was eligible to be drafted, and he was talking to a scout from the Red Sox who said, have you had any disciplinary incidents or other times you've gotten in trouble that I should know about? And Jackson just sort of blurted it out, is the way the story goes. And of course, scouts gossip pretty quickly. Word got around, and every team backed away, saying, nope, we're absolutely not taking you, etc. And Jackson's agent, Blake Karofsky, was going to drop him. And it turns out Blake represents Jacob Steinmetz, who's a pitcher in the Diamondbacks organization, and one of the only Orthodox Jewish players I've ever heard of.
Our listenership is very familiar with Jake Steinmetz and the Steinmetz family as a whole, but still very interesting part of the story as well.
Yes. And so what ended up happening is Blake reached out to Jacob's father, Elliot Steinmetz, um, and said, we've had this situation with this kid. We're probably going to drop him. And Elliot said, can I talk to him? And essentially see is there a path forward here? And these are Elliot's words, which to me was very interesting. I'm not Jewish. I'm not ethnically Jewish. I'm not religious. So, I sort of really kind of took the cue for the direction here from Elliot, who said, I wanted to work with this kid, Jackson, and see, is there a path forward? He didn't use the word redemption. I'm glad, because I don't really like the way that gets thrown around. But he said, is there a way to educate this kid? Is there an opportunity here? Because otherwise, what are we saying, right? That you can do something awful like that and never have a way back when you're 17. This isn't an adult. And so then Elliot detailed to me the whole education process that he went through with Jackson, other people he brought in. I handed a lot of this off to Brendan, who really brought the story home and finished it. We wanted to tell, it's less about Core Jackson and more about what this whole process was like for the Yankees, for the agent, and for the player. And, I'm happy with how the story came out because I think it leaves it to the reader. A lot of readers have said he never should have gotten a second chance. You can think that. You can absolutely think that. We were not trying to pass that kind of judgment. I can tell you personally, if I were that scouting director, I would have probably said, nah, this is not worth it. That's pretty bad. I don't know that I entirely believe all of the explanations, but I think it's more nuanced than that. I don't think it's a black and white story. And so we wanted to just this is the whole process. You can read that and you can draw some conclusions here of whether you think the Yankees did the right thing or whether you would have done something differently if you were in their shoes.
And it was interesting to see in the story. I mean, you talk about some of unsurprisingly, there are Jewish members of the Yankees front office and development organization. And they've been, actively aware of this and involved. In some ways you could say, the Yankees might be the best positioned team to try to make it through with somebody who had this sort of incident in their past. So I agree. I think you don't make a judgment about it. And it is interesting to see the different perspectives on it. This was a kid who, after all, was, I suppose, 18 or 19 when he was a freshman at Nebraska.
Yeah. But the story, they keep saying he was 17. I think he was 18.
Okay.
I have a 19-year-old. I love my daughter. To me, she's still a child, right? I know her brain is still forming. And if she did, I think this is pretty horrible what Core Jackson did. But still, I probably had a little more empathy in this situation to think, because I could easily, imagine his parents seeing this and saying, you'd be embarrassed, you'd be ashamed, but you'd also say, all right, where do we go from here? And should there be some kind of path forward, and what would it look like? That's where I got really interested, because originally I was thinking scandal, not that I'm like trying to dig up dirt necessarily, but this happened and this should be reported. This is a big enough story that we should report it. And then as soon as I started to scratch a little bit, I realized, no, this story is very different than what I thought it was. And the process and the discussion about, is there a way back from doing something like this? Can a player get to a point where some teams would consider drafting him? And to be clear, I have heard from multiple scouts or other teams, you see, we just took him off the board. We weren't going to consider him at all. So the Yankees were not the only one, but they were unusual.
It's interesting to hear that it was a scouting director who sort of brought it up in the first place, that they had done their background on this. And I mean, I guess I'm more familiar with stories, I think, in football that have been more public, like Laramie Tunsil or Manti Te'o, these people with sort of these huge, things that happen pre-draft and really changes their draft stock. I'm curious in the baseball world, and obviously you're someone who's dealt a lot with prospects and prospect or projecting out high school and college players and how they get drafted and all that, and scouting. How much is character built into it? I mean, when you're drafting a 17-year-old kid out of high school who is good enough to get drafted in the MLB, I'm going to assume that 95% of his life has been around baseball. For a 17-year-old doesn't have a chance to. It's not really fair. They don't. Most of them are 17 years old. They've been to prom and they've played baseball for 150 days of the year for their whole life. But how much are teams looking at that when they're drafting or thinking about who to draft?
I mean, to me, what you're talking about is what we call makeup, and that is a big catch-all term that probably doesn't the more. And Sarah, one of my colleagues, and I have been kicking around trying to write something about this. where this is what area scouts really do. It is their job to get to know the kids, get to know their families, maybe get to know the coaches, and find out what kind of person is this player who we're talking about giving him $2 million.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kid. And so there's this Core Jackson story is what I think of as tangible makeup, where something specific happened and we either have documentation, records, or just multiple people who are saying, yes, this is confirming this is an actual thing that happened, where you can say, hey, I don't want to take this player because of this anti-Semitic incident, or I know of a player recently in the draft who had a domestic violence accusation. Just an accusation, never adjudicated, never went to court or anything. But you know what? That's a thing. And teams were aware of that. And I talked to teams about that even before the draft. I actually had a bit of that story. So there's stuff like that. It's I think, very easy to deal with. As long as you have area scouts, local scouts, you're going to get that information and you can make your decision. But it becomes very binary, right? We will or we won't.
Mm-hmm.
There's all the other makeup stuff, which is like, what kind of worker is the kid? How quickly does he take instruction or make adjustments? Is he a good teammate? Those are really hard things to measure. And I can think of plenty of examples too, where we thought he was a good kid and he wasn't, or we thought he wasn't a good kid. James Wood's a good example with the Nationals now, where a lot of stories about him in high school. He didn't play hard. He looked really unhappy while he was playing. He wasn't showing effort. He seemed to be giving up at bats, and the Padres took him in the second round, gave him $3 million, which I was, what on earth are they doing?
Mm-hmm.
And now he's played for two organizations who had nothing but raves about his character, his work ethic, him as a teammate, which just comes back to hey, that stuff's really hard. Measuring a man in that way versus we have, an arrest report or stories or whatever. Those are easy as long as you just sort of have scouts on the ground to do that job. It's much harder to get a sense of what a 17, 18-year-old is like and what he's going to be like 3 to 5 years down the road too.
Yeah, and the age thing, I mean, I think that's a salient part of the story as well, that it's just, again, an 18-year-old kid, and I'm not excusing behavior, obviously. Yeah. We've covered unfortunately, we've covered a number of anti-Semitic incidents in sports over the years. Yeah. And, there was an incident a couple years ago of Myers Leonard, who's formerly a basketball player, said a racial slur while streaming. And, the guy was like 28 at the time or 29, and he didn't play in the NBA again after that. So, I think what people generally want to see, and this, I think applies to anti-Semitism, if there's a racism incident, other incidents as well, it's like, you really want to see some growth or some development or something like that. And, I not to harp on this, but like, I think like, Jaron Duran was an issue. There was an issue last year where, he said some of the things, but I've seen people online really harping on it that, for all his talk about putting it behind him or whatever, he hasn't really made any outreach to the LGBT community or anybody else to sort of make things better. And I don't know, it's very tricky because it's like, I don't think there's not like a checklist or anything like that. It's like, well, if Core Jackson does these things and, meets with a Jewish group in New York, if he gets called up or plays for one of the minor league teams in the Jewish neighborhood, like then all is forgiven. It's a process, and it's a long process probably.
I agree. And I do think, this was sort of beyond what we were trying to cover in the story. But and it's more speculative too, but if I were with the Yankees, I'd say, okay, we're obviously comfortable with what you've done and the point you're at now, but it's not over. Obviously he's had a couple incidents around alcohol. My understanding is he is sober now and has been for many months, but I would say we expect that to continue. And also, this is going to follow you through your career, and we expect you to, at the very least, maintain the level of commitment that you've shown so far. And that's probably going to mean some outreach, especially if you do get to New York. I would say this even if there weren't a large Jewish community, but obviously there is in New York. And so that's probably just going to it's just going to be the optics of it, right? There's just going to be more attention paid to it the moment he does get to the big leagues. And we're expecting you to do certain things to basically get out in front of it and to make it clear that that's not reflective of who you are. By the time he gets to the big leagues, if he does, and he may not, he'd be 25, 26. We're talking many years in the past, at least far enough that he can sort of show a body of work and say, I've done all these things to demonstrate that I did a horrible thing, but I am not that person anymore. I mean, that's how I think you've got to handle it. I'm just thinking from a human perspective, not even from a PR perspective, but this kid's going to go through some stuff. And also, I'd want to make sure that it's true that you didn't just do all this stuff just to have a chance at a baseball career, too, that it was authentic and sincere. And the way you do that is keep doing it after you've gotten your contract. And so I would probably put different expectations on him that I would on almost any other player. And what it sounds like is he's willing to do that. I mean, this kid,
Right.
I give him a lot of credit. I don't give him any credit for obviously for what he did, but
Sure.
the amount of work that he put in, as that was described to me, the actual hours and the studying, and I was thinking, God, this kid probably knows more about the history of anti-Semitism and the history of the Holocaust than the typical American high school student at this point. Far more, I would say. And he did this in addition to being a college student and being a baseball player. And I mean, obviously, I think we should all be learning about this stuff in high school.
Sure.
But good for him for doing
Yeah.
that. It doesn't erase anything that came before, but also it's like, damn, that's a lot of thinking of things I've done in my life that required that much work.
It's good to focus, I think, on the positive that can come out of something like this, and that seems to be his perspective, and hopefully the trajectory as well.
That's the big thing for me is you want to see this continue. You want to see that this was not. It's always I'm no more cynical than the next guy, I think, but I was like, is this all just to get drafted? I don't think so, but it's possible.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Keith. Before we go, any Jewish prospects to look forward in the future? I know it's a bit of a gotcha question, but any thoughts on Eric Raiselman with the Yankees? He's been, I think, pitching okay in AAA recently.
I did not. I've seen their AAA club a couple of times. I don't think I've seen him pitch this year, and he's not on my radar otherwise. I have to confess, I often don't know.
Wow.
I wouldn't ask.
Yeah, of course. we're the Jewish sports experts. We spend a lot of time thinking about Jake Geloff on your radar at all? Zach Geloff's younger brother.
Yes,
he's in the Dodgers organization.
It's big power. It is. I mean, it's more power than his brother had.
Okay.
See, I didn't know they were Jewish, and they're from Delaware, which is where I live too.
That's right.
Jake, to me, it's just even in college, 95 up. He had no chance. You could get him with velocity. He's in the right organization. Like the Dodgers do good things with swings. They do good things with pitch recognition. There were very few organizations that would be better for him. But the last time I saw him in pro ball, it was kind of the same issue. It wasn't even so much picking up breaking stuff. It's just they could hit him with velocity in or up, and he wasn't adjusting to it. And that's going to be the change. I think there's another brother coming too.
I think so as well, but I'm not sure what level he's at.
They should have more kids. They've done pretty well. It's like the
I think the younger kids, like they get better and better because they have to compete with the older brothers, right?
Oh
the eldest brother has play with travel ball or whatever, but the younger brother he's got to play with his older brother who's a prospect or whatever. So
and I think they get mad. Why is my older brother getting all the attention? I'm just as good as that guy is. So maybe it gives them a little bit of an edge.
Speaking of, I mean, it feels like based on what we were talking about before, there's a real premium on high school kids who are the children of the sons of former players, and I assume a lot of that goes to the sort of makeup character or whatever you want to call it. That's like one way or another, Drew Jones knows his way, around a MLB clubhouse or the Holiday brothers and all that. Like they're not going to be starstruck or anything like that.
And you assume that growing up, and this is not universally true. I can think of counterexamples, but I do think there's the assumption that you grew up around the game. Mm-hmm. You've got to have picked up some of that awareness, some of that instinct, some of the sort of feel for the game. I mean, there is something to be said for being around the game that much. I think that's, in my experience, sons of big leaguers probably on the whole are better at that soft stuff. But you bring up Drew Jones, and he's not his dad. And I actually have wondered, he has really struggled in his pro career, and he's struggled with injuries, but he's kind of healthy this year now. Yeah, and not playing super well. And gosh, maybe it actually hurt him that he was the son of big leaguers. He freaking looks like his dad, and you watch him out there, and you're like, hey, he's pretty good in center, but he's not his father. I'm like, well, that's not fair.
It's true. It's not fair to be compared to, and there's very few
I don't know, Hall of Fame sons who have outclassed their Hall of Fame level or almost Hall of Fame. Like I guess Ken Griffey and
Griffey's the best one.
And
right?
Barry are probably the two examples of,
Yeah, two guys who were
their
like
dads
all
are both
very good dads.
exactly.
And they became Hall of Famers themselves. Well, should be Hall of Famers in Bond's case.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Keith. We'll let you go back to your vacation. Before you go, I just wanted to ask you one more thing.
Yeah.
I know you're a big board game aficionado. Is there anything you've been playing recently? Any board game recommendations on recent plays?
Yes. So been playing a heavier game called Darwin's Journey, which is probably like an hour and a half, 2-hour game. Played it online a bunch and I'm obsessed. I think it's brilliant.
Okay.
And I am very hard on those heavy games because it's hard to get them to the table. They're long. It is a medium long teach. Like I'm not bringing that out with the rookie gamers, but I got to say, the more I play it, the more that thing hums. And it's just the way you're connecting different things on the board. I'm not good at it, but it's very intellectually stimulating to try to like, how can I do this and make 3 other things work for me at the same time? Because then when you do it, it's extremely satisfying. Even if I lose, I'm like, yeah, but I did a thing. So that feels good.
Great recommendation. Well, thanks so much, Keith. I really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure.
So it was fascinating hearing a lawyer talk to a man named Law. Not just necessarily about, torts and litigation and such, but actually about baseball prospects and anti-Semitism.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a big fan of Keith's for a long time. And before we recorded, I showed him a picture of his book, Smart Baseball, which I have in hard copy.
Oh,
so
I
don't know if that's too much like wearing your favorite band's shirt to their concert, but nevertheless, I did it.
So that's a fascinating interview, and thank you so much, Jamie, for piloting that. But in lighter news, we had the release in the last 2 weeks of, I think I would call it the sequel to what we have previously determined to be the greatest Jewish sports movie of all time.
Yeah, so we haven't talked about this on air, but Happy Gilmore 2 came out, starring pod favorite Adam Sandler. It is a sequel to the 1990s classic Happy Gilmore. The movie, I would say, does give us the truth that Happy Gilmore is canonically Jewish, which I think, we've always maintained that any Adam Sandler character is Jewish unless told otherwise.
It went from the Hanukkah song, just the Hanukkah song, to actually in canonically Jewish.
Yeah, he's the answer to a Jeopardy question, and Ken Jennings, nobody gets it, but Ken Jennings says, he was a Jewish golfer or something like that. What did you think of the movie? What did you think of Happy Gilmore 2?
With all the love that I have for the Sandman, it was incredibly stupid. That said,
yeah,
it was also a great time. I think it was significantly dumber than the first, but it was also like quite a joyful romp through discussion of the future of golf. I mean, everyone wanted to see Scotty Scheffler get hit in the balls, not because they don't like him, but because he's like, let's see this man be goofy.
I thought the golf stuff was good in the first half. I thought the live type tour that they compete with in the second half was idiotic, and that just sort of was not as much fun. We should say that that part included as a villain Benny Safdie, the director and member of the Safdie brothers directing team, as the main villain, sort of as a sort of very arch, I don't know, megalomaniac, sort of like a White Goodman type character.
Yeah, a very, very White Goodman type character. Although, do we think Benny Safdie's character was also canonically Jewish?
Good question. I don't recall if they actually have him, talk about that at all. I think
does he speak any English? As like
his name is Frank. His name is Frank Manatee in the in the movie. So I guess
probably not Jewish.
But
although he is endangered.
His
name is Manatee. That is a small endangered population. So that's something.
Right, and partial to the warm waters of Florida. You should mention as well, though, that Benny Safdie and Josh Safdie are directing films, both about sports that are coming out I think both around this fall and winter. Benny is directing The Smashing Machine, which is not about a Jewish subject, but stars Dwayne Johnson as MMA fighter Mark Kerr. And Josh Safdie is directing Marty Supreme. These are both their individual directorial efforts. Marty Supreme is about a Jewish ping pong star player, Marty Reisman, starring elite ball knower Timothée Chalamet, as the ping pong player, and I'm excited to see both of them. I really like the Safdie brothers when they did Uncut Gems, one of the great Jewish sports movies of all time. Excited to see what they come out with on their own. I think it's great that they're focusing on athletes. I love their do sports movies.
Yeah, the Marty Supreme trailer, it's come out. Presumably you've all watched it. I think the last mainstream ping pong movie might have been Forrest Gump.
Oh, there was that. What was it called? Balls of Fury.
Yes, I wouldn't necessarily call that like a ping pong, and maybe it is a ping pong movie in the sense we brought up White Goodman earlier. That's in the same ethos.
Right.
But I'm very looking forward to Marty Supreme. It looks quite excellent. I do want to point out, Adam Sandler both cast his whole family, his Jewish daughters, as main characters in the movie. And we've talked about him, I would say, at length before. Jewish wrestler Maxwell Jacob Friedman, MJF, proudly Jewish wrestler, plays Gordy, one of Happy Gilmore's sons. I believe he's the one who pretends the gas pump is his penis. And sort of the montage of Happy Gilmore's sons.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess there were some other, a few other Jewish cameos as well. Well, Ben Stiller reprised his role from the first movie as the sort of
That's Hal.
Demonic Hal. Yeah, the demonic orderly. Trying to think who else. I feel like that was probably about it in terms of Jewish cameos and stuff like that. But I don't know. I guess it's sort of like everyone will watch Happy Gilmore 2. It's not a recommend for me. It was too dumb. And I don't know, the first one holds such a place of prominence in my heart, but it does make me feel like make more comedic golf movies. Like we get there just haven't been that many,
And it's nice to be like, it's nice to see a movie and be like, oh my God, there's Fred Couples. Like, oh, there's Nelly Corda playing a hospital person. Like for the golf
my favorite joke. Yeah, my favorite joke in the movie was Jack Nicklaus ordering an Arnold Palmer, ordering a half iced tea, half lemonade, and then being asked if it was an Arnold Palmer. And he's saying, no, actually, I'm Jack Nicklaus, but I get that all the time. So, keep making golf movies. And I'm hoping that the Safdie brothers sports movies are exciting too. Moving on, just a little sports news. We did want to do a little football preview, it being that time of year where college football is starting up and pro football will be starting up soon as well. But unfortunately, not a lot to talk about this year. The ranks are sort of thin for both college and pro football.
We're hoping for a fresh start. For Quadzilla. I'm proud Jew and proud of telling people that are surprised he's Jewish. AJ Dillon, longtime Green Bay Packers, has been battling through injury and going for a fresh start with the reigning champion Philadelphia Eagles.
He missed all of 2024. He was just sort of injured with a neck injury all year, which is, I don't know, rare, I guess, to miss an entire year with a neck injury seems odd.
But I think as a running back, you probably need your neck fairly strong.
But he was, he had a pretty decent sized role for Green Bay the last couple of years. Put north of 600 yards for 3 years in a row as a backup, and obviously he will be the backup in Philadelphia behind Saquon Barkley. But could have a significant role, or it just could be a big, good enough offense that he gets enough touches and plays a significant role. Obviously, the Eagles are expected to be a pretty good team.
A contender. And it's a short contract, so maybe he parlays this into a starting job somewhere else.
Aside from that, it's pretty slim pickings in terms of Jewish football players. Greg Joseph played for 3 different teams, a kicker in 2024. He doesn't currently have a role, but the way kickers work, often they find a spot for someone here and there. Jake Curhan, the offensive tackle previously with the Seattle Seahawks, I believe was just cut and re-signed to the practice squad. So again, could make an appearance on the roster of the Arizona Cardinals where he re-signed. Might not, practice squad can often be the end of the career. Michael Dunn, offensive lineman who had gotten to 13 games last year with the Cleveland Browns. Similarly, on the practice squad now, for the 49ers. Maybe we'll make it up, maybe not. But that's about it. Pretty slim pickings. As far as we can tell, no one got drafted who is Jewish. And there's just not a lot of, there hasn't been a lot of restoration in the NFL ranks since Edelman's retirement, Ali Marpet's retirement, and Mitchell and Jeff Schwartz's retirement. Those are sort of the last prominent,
our peak of the
Super Bowl
NFL
winning Jews.
Our peak in the NFL as players, as a group, we seem to be on the downslope.
Since it's been a downward trend since Edelman's Super Bowl MVP.
And since the Josh Rosen flame out, he was the great hope. Unfortunately, not so much. But with any luck,
on the call,
we'll get an AJ Dillon renaissance, or maybe a Jake Retzlaff high draft pick next year.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the other thing I wanted to talk about on the college side. Obviously, we talked a lot about Jake Retzlaff in our previous episode. No decision yet about whether or not he will be the starting QB for Tulane. But it seems likely that he will, or we'll see soon. And one other person I want to shout out is Zevi, or I don't know if he pronounced it Zevi or Tzvi in his heart of hearts. But Zevi Eckhouse is going to be the starting quarterback for the Washington State Cougars. He had previously set all kinds of records at Bryant University in Division III, but before last year, transferred to Washington State, had 4 touchdowns in the Holiday Bowl for Washington State, and is going to be their starting quarterback in his last year. So Washington State not necessarily expected to do much. They are the last vestige of the Pac-12. They're one of 2 remaining teams in the Pac-12 now. So 50-50 shot that they win the Pac-12 for what that's worth. And we'll see what happens with them. Obviously Washington State has I don't think it's an automatic bowl berth if you win. Yeah. Washington State does have an illustrious tradition of quarterbacks. Drew Bledsoe, at least in the college ranks. Drew Bledsoe, Ryan Leaf, Gardner Minshew are all former Cougars, and we'll see if Zevi Eckhouse is added to their ranks in terms of what Cougar legends. So that's something to watch out for this Saturday. Before we go, we just wanted to give a shout out to some recent news, pretty local news. There was a big Canadian Jewish news article, the most read article, we're told by our producer Michael, in the past month, about the new hockey arena open in honor of Barry and Honey Sherman. That just opened up in Vaughan, north of Toronto.
At the sort of the large campus. For those who don't know, this campus is an enormous JCC. It houses the northern campus of Bialik Hebrew Day School. It houses all sorts of Jewish cultural events. I would call it, other than the What a Bagel that happens to be about 3 blocks from it, maybe the Jewish Cultural Center of Thornhill Maple.
And it was. This new hockey arena was open in part due to a $52 million donation by Jonathan Sherman, the son of the late Honey and Barry Sherman. And friend of the pod, Zach Hyman, was on hand, along with some other NHLers.
He brought out McDavid. They came and they skated. McDavid graced. I know lots of people have called him McJesus, but McJesus graced the Jewish hockey rink, and Jesus was Jewish. So maybe you got a little confidence. Maybe you got a little confluence there.
Sure, they've got some Hebrew lettered hockey jerseys hanging up on the walls. So pretty exciting stuff. If you live in Vaughan, if you're a hockey player in Vaughan, I think you'll hopefully become familiar with the arena. You'll be there.
You'll find your way to that arena at some point.
So check that article out on the Canadian Jewish News, written by Jonathan Rothman. But aside from that, end of a long summer, excited for football. Even if it's limited in terms of its Jewish representation. But whenever things happen, Jews and football stuff happens, we'll be on it.
The dog days are If Sam Sauls gets into a college football game somehow, we'll be on it.
Sure.
He really got a Rudy send-off at the end of last year. He played 46 seconds on special teams at the end of his final game.
Yeah.
So if he finds his way in, for those of you who don't know, Sam Sauls is the kippah-wearing third-string wide receiver for Texas A&M. Was last year,
yeah. A walk-on who couldn't play on Saturdays as he's a Shomer Shabbos. But
exactly
that was his last year of eligibility. So I think that's I think he it's a good story. We'll see what he does in the future with it.
We'll welcome him to the CFL. I'll welcome him to the CFL. He can come to Rosh Hashanah in 2 weeks at the Pulver family household.
Sure. Anyways, we'll leave it there for now. As always, we're brought to you by the Canadian Jewish News. Michael Freeman is our executive producer. You can find our content on the Canadian Jewish News website, thecjn.ca, and follow us on Twitter at Menschwarmers.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.